well, I think when I first started writing, memory wasn't as integral to my concept of what this film might be. And over the course of delving into my own memories in an attempt to form an outline, it was, and it became increasingly a part of it. And by the time I finally wrote the script, that process of remembering myself found its way into the structure of the film. And more than just found its way into the structure of the film, it became completely inextricable from what was on the page, what I was doing, and where the film built to ultimately at the end. And then the collaborative process with my cinematographer of thinking about shots, thinking about how we communicate the different points of view, how we would ultimately communicate this idea that the whole film is told from the point of view of somebody you hardly ever see looking back and reflecting and imagining and reimagining parts of this finite period of time. It was just a lot of fun. Definitely kind of one of the most creative parts of the process. I've read a few lines about how authentic Gregory Oak's camera work is in those scenes, and we can only laugh because the camera was always in the hands of the actors. I think I was always writing for one at any given time, so there were days that I would write very much with Sophie in mind, and there were other days I'd write thinking more of Calum. In Sophie's arc, I think, because the origins of her character kind of began with me as a kid, was always much stronger, and the last major redraft of the script before we went into production really focused on Calum, because I think that was always the weakest link in the script, and wrote index cards for every scene and I laid them on the floor, but I started with all of Calum's individual scenes, kind of the private moments that kind of escalated his internal struggle in the film, so it was very clear to me what his arc was. But I think the core of the film is really their relationship and their bond and the intimacy and warmth and love between them. So to that degree, regardless of which character I was focused on at any given moment in writing, that was shared. We had 2 weeks together. I was very lucky to have 2 weeks with them before we arrived on set. I wasn't able to spend that much time with them in those 2 weeks. I had to do technical scouts and other work in relation to prepping the film, and so they spent most of those days together. And I have to say, a lot of the credit for the work that went into building that relationship goes to Paul, who really became an extension of Frankie's family over the time that we were in Turkey. Spent a lot of time with them, spent a lot of time with her, building a relationship, both for the sake of the film and because we were there with a young person who had never performed before, and we all tried our best to make her feel as comfortable as she could and ensure that she had a good time amid the work of it all. She really liked it. She was moved by it. By the end of it, I think felt the sadness of it in a way I didn't expect her to. She had a redacted version of the script that we read together in person. She never held a copy of the script. We didn't over-rehearse in that way to try and keep it as fresh as possible. Try to avoid it sounding rote or learned, since she had never performed before. But yeah, she seemed to experience the film as a film in a way that I didn't really think was possible, especially given that she saw it for the first time at the premiere. Yeah, I had a playlist for each actor. There was a Calum playlist and a Sophie playlist. And I think at a certain point I probably shared both. And I would say that Frankie disliked them both equally. And Paul, found what he liked and was familiar with much of it already. My editor and I selected all the music that's in the film. It really just came about through editing. And through collaboration with our music supervisor, who would put together playlists for us and really help when things became challenging to clear and provide alternatives. But yeah, for the most part, it was a gradual process founded on 7 years of listening to 90s playlists as a warm-up to writing, and there were songs I knew I wanted and songs that just never fit, one of which is now in the trailer, which is kind of satisfying. It just came about because it always was. I don't remember the moment I chose that song. It's a song I knew probably better than I should have as a very young child, probably one of the first songs I ever knew word for word, to be honest. And it was just always that song. It seemed absurd, it seemed appropriate, it seemed painful for her to sing at him. And the idea was in the film is that she had chosen the song because it was a song he liked. You know, it was like a song that he listened to. You don't have this 11-year-old kid listening to REM, but she chose it for him with the hope that he would join her, and he doesn't. I mean, for a few weeks, Blair worked on the assembly, and I worked on some ideas around TV footage, and kind of came down from the high of being in production and the adrenaline of being in production, and would find very task-oriented things to do. And then when we came together, it was a case of just building out the assembly. Like, we've worked together before, we know each other very well, we share a similar taste, but in some ways quite different editing approaches. I think Blair has a much clearer view of the bigger picture, and I'm much more interested in like the specifics of kind of cut to cut in some ways. But it was really about putting together that first cut. It's at like 2.5 hours. Our producers told us never to send them a cut over 2 hours ever again. And then it was a case of just working through sections of the film. There were some sections that just worked and really never changed from that first assembly. And there were other sections that really didn't work. And we had to find strategies around that weren't just cutting scenes, weren't just cutting scenes better, but that were really reimagining the flow of sequences in the film. And that's a lot of the work that Blair did, really spectacularly. Feeling anything, you know, when you see something and there's something that moves you. I think it's just a total combination of things, of watching films because I love films, of being recommended films by my close collaborators, and then seeing things that you just have a genuine response to, you know, like, and that's not true of everything that you watch, and so you look out for that feeling. And it's the same when you're watching things, and it's the same when you're making your own film, is you're looking out for the moments where you feel something, you know, and you move toward it. And I think it's fun to kind of play with moments that inspire you or take inspiration from things that you love. And for the most part, I don't think they're really identifiable were I not standing here divulging what they are, you know, because I think things tend to get transformed during your own process, but it is a part of filmmaking I love.